Hi guys, this is a video about practicing on the guitar. Now you'll never get anywhere playing an instrument unless you practice, and that probably goes without saying. But how and when should you practice, and how much time should you devote to playing the guitar when you pick it up to practice? That's the question, and the best way to start playing the guitar, I think, is just strumming chords and singing along to songs, if you enjoy singing anyway. It's probably the most enjoyable way to learn your chords. And once you've got the chords, then you're well on the way to guitar mastery and you can develop things from there. But you need to learn the chords first of all. Now, nearly all songs have more than one chord, and you're not going to enjoy playing them unless you can change from one chord to another chord to another chord easily and fluidly. Therefore, before you can play any song easily, you have to practice changing between those chords. And it's not enough for you to know where you're putting your fingers for each chord. If you have to think about where you're putting each finger as you put it down for each chord, and you're placing you think you know the chord, but for every chord you're looking at your fingers and you're thinking, now my index finger goes here, my second finger goes here. If you're at that level, then you're never going to be able to play through a song with any degree of accomplishment. You need to develop what is called muscle memory in your fingers. And once you've got muscle memory, you're no longer thinking about where your fingers are going. It's essentially your fingers learn to just fall in the way that forms a chord, and you're not thinking about it in your head. You're not thinking where your fingers are going. You're just thinking about the chord, say the G, and your fingers will go to that position. And once you've got that, you've mastered that chord shape, and you need that non-thinking way of moving to a chord before you can play any song well. Because at the speed of most songs, if you have to think about where your fingers are going for each chord, well, you can play a D chord fine, but then you have to think about where you're putting your fingers for the G chord. Well, the song has moved on and you're left behind. So you need to practice going from chord to chord so that you develop this muscle memory and your fingers just know where they're going to go when you think of the chord to play. And then you'll be able to change quickly enough to be able to keep up with the speed of the song. And to get to this level, it doesn't actually take very long. But, and here's the big but, you need to practice, and you need to practice regularly and often. And that might sound like a chore, but it shouldn't be when you're beginning, because you don't have to do it for very long. Now, when I say practice often, I mean you have to practice every day, maybe several times a day. Now that sounds like it could be hard work, but it isn't, because every time you're practicing when you're starting out, you only need to do it for a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you've got the time. But you need to do it every day. If you don't do it every day, you'll find that it'll just fly out of your head, basically. And the next time you come to pick up the guitar, you'll be back where you were before and you won't see any development. So you need to do it every day, but just for a very short amount of time every day. At this point, when you're starting out, it's better to practice for 5 minutes or so every day than it is to practice for a whole hour, once a week. It's regular, everyday practice that gets you to being able to play the muscle memory in your fingers, to be able to play these chords without thinking. That's what you're running towards. So one of the ways of practicing your chords every day is to play the chords, moving from one chord to another without looking at your fingers on the guitar. Now, most of you, when you're starting out, you're sort of figuring out where your fingers go, and you need to look down at your fingers on the guitar. I mean, that's natural, of course. But once you know the chord, say the G chord, you know where your fingers are supposed to go, you need to practice moving your hand to that chord from another chord, say the D chord, moving to the G chord without looking at the neck of the guitar and without looking at what your fingers are doing. Your fingers need to practice going to that chord without you looking. So you start off, say, with a D chord. You need to start in a position on the guitar. So you can look at the guitar first of all, get your D chord, so you know where your fingers are in relation to the neck of the guitar. And when you've got your D chord, and then you look away and you try to move to the G chord. Now obviously you need to know what the G chord is before you start doing this exercise, but so you move from the D chord to the G chord, and you try and think about the shape of the G chord in your head when you move from the D chord to the G chord. Now if you can't play the chord and see if it sounds okay. If it does, great, you know, keep going. If it sounds terrible, look down and see where you're going wrong. Move back to the D chord, look away again, and try to go to the G chord again without looking. Play it and see what it sounds like. And do this, you know, 5-6 times. Every time you get it wrong, look down, find it again, move back to the D chord, try again to go to the G chord without looking, and then go from the G chord to the D chord without looking. And then you can get, you know, a bit crazy and go to the A chord, for example, without looking. Try and move around these chords, G, A, D, without looking down at the neck of the guitar. And once you can do that, well, you're on the way to becoming a guitar wizard, basically. So, but that's the idea, not looking, playing those chords, and continue doing that for 5 minutes a day. I mean, basically every time you see your guitar, just pick it up, play a chord, move to another chord without looking. You know, you need your guitar out of its case. If you've got a case, take it out of the case. If it's in your room, leave it lying around, you know. And every time you see it, every time you pass it by, just pick it up, go from a D chord to a G chord without looking, and a G chord to a D chord without looking. And yeah, do it once, twice, 3 times a day, but every day, basically. Every day. You need to do it every day. A short amount of practice every day is much better than a much longer practice once a week.